Welcome to another story made by Oracle One. The rain had been relentless all night, a steady drumbeat against the rusted tin roof of the old truck as it rolled along the slick country road. Matthew Hammond's knuckles whitened as he gripped the steering wheel, his headlights barely piercing through the fog that hung like a thick blanket over the landscape. Somewhere on this twisting labyrinth of forgotten backroads, surely a way out existed. The map he'd found months ago, with edges curling and ink faded by time, seemed to mock him. Every path was supposed to lead away, towards the highway, towards safety, away from the isolation of this forsaken village. But instead, every step he took brought him back to the same place. Her house. The image of the house, an ancient, sagging timber building with shuttered windows and a crooked porch, had been burned into his mind ever since his arrival. Situated on the crest of a hill, surrounded by an orchard of gnarled apple trees heavy with rot, the house felt suspended in time, as if the air around it refused to flow and trapped it like a spider grips its prey. And she was always there, standing at the edge of the porch, waiting with those sunken eyes that seemed too old for any living creature. Matthew wiped a bead of sweat and rain from his brow, the chill of autumn seeping into his bones. His breath came in shallow gasps as he forced his truck's engine to press on. Earlier that day, he had thought the village was just a quaint backwater, a stopover in his desperate search for peace after the wreckage of his last life. But now, every exit he attempted, every fork in the road, looped back endlessly to the same view. That wretched woman's house. He remembered how it began, his hope flickering like a candle, soon snuffed out by reality. 2 nights ago, the moon was a thin silver sickle as he drove down a narrow dirt track flanked by dense pines. The village had announced itself with a fading sign, "Welcome to Rivenwood." No stores, no streetlights except the flickering gas lamp at the town square, where a few spectral figures loitered silently. The scent of damp earth and rot filled the air. Matthew had needed shelter and tried to ask for a room. The villagers, gaunt and wary, muttered warnings in hushed voices and then a name, Margaret. She was the woman who owned the lone inn, or so they said. She keeps the fires burning all year, one old man had whispered, the cigarette dangling from his fingers. But pay the price, and her smile never fades. The inn was indeed the woman's house, perched on the hill outside the hamlet. It looked like something from a nightmare, blackened wood with peeling paint, stained curtains that fluttered even without wind, and the faintest glow of candlelight visible through the cracks. Yet when Matthew knocked, the door opened before he could finish the second rap. There she was. A pale wraith with those 2 large eyes, smiling like a predator revealing too many teeth. She welcomed him inside with a voice like cracked glass, offering a cup of bitter tea and a bed for the night. But as he settled in, an uneasy feeling gnawed at him. The house creaked and moaned, wood shifting like it was breathing. The clock on the mantel ticked backward. Outside, the wind seemed to whisper secrets in a language he couldn't understand. The next morning, desperate to leave, Matthew had climbed into his truck and aimed for the West Road. But as the miles stretched, after a long drive through whispering trees and melancholy fields of dead grass, the village's old church appeared out of the fog, then the empty town square, and finally the same hill and Margaret's house, as if the earth itself was a trap. Panic had gripped him like a vice. He tried the east route next, again. The endless loop spiraled back to the same grim property. Now, hours after sundown and drenched by rain, he sat frozen behind the wheel, eyes locked onto the silhouette on the porch. She stood silently, her dark hair plastered to her face by the rain, wearing a faded black dress that seemed wound from shadows themselves. Her gaze followed him without blinking, each time welcoming him back like an unwanted guest returned. Suddenly, Matthew's headlights caught a new detail. At the foot of the porch stairs lay a twisted shape, something white and ragged like fabric fluttering in the wind. His stomach churned. He shook his head, almost certain it was a blanket someone had dropped, but then realized it was a child's doll with glassy eyes staring blankly into the gathering night. He closed his eyes and pressed the horn, the blaring noise echoing into the nothingness beyond the house. No response came except the creaking porch boards beneath her feet as she began to descend slowly. Her pale hands clutched the railing, and when she reached the ground, the stillness was so profound it felt as if the world itself was holding its breath. Matthew's voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. "Why won't you let me go?" She smiled, a thin curve that never reached her eyes. Her voice was the same as the rattling teacup she'd handed him the day before. "You belong here, Matthew. The roads always bring you home. It's the way it must be." Desperation clawed at him. "What do you mean? I don't belong to this place. I don't belong to you." "Ah, but we all belong somewhere." Her gaze drifted to the doll. "Especially those who carry dark secrets, those who run but cannot escape." Matthew swallowed hard, suddenly remembering why he had come here in the first place. He had buried memories too painful to face, had fled the city after the accident, the crash that took his wife and left him broken. Seeking solitude, he'd followed the trembling threads of a rumor, a whisper about Rivenwood's strange calm. Instead, he had walked into a trap, one of ancient making. "Please," he pleaded, gripping the wheel. "Let me leave." Her form shimmered slightly in the rain, dissolving like smoke, but her voice echoed all around him. "To leave, you must pay the toll." A shudder ran through the truck, the radio crackling to life despite being unplugged. The crackling voice spoke in a low tone repeated over and over. "Every road comes home. Every road comes home." The rain stopped abruptly. The world around him seemed to fade, the night folding in on itself like a closing maw. When Matthew blinked, the truck was parked again, exactly where it had been 2 nights ago, the base of the hill, facing the crooked path that wound up to her house. Despite the wet chill in the air, he felt the heat of dread suffocate him. "Why me?" he whispered into the heavy silence. A soft laugh came from behind. He turned to see a shadow detach itself from the darkness of the trees. A little girl with tangled black hair and eyes too wide to be normal. In her hand, she clutched the doll he had seen before. She smiled, a fraction of Margaret's grin. "Because you broke the promise," she said simply. "Because you tried to leave what should not be left." Matthew tried to start the truck again, but the engine coughed and died. The girl stepped closer, voice innocent yet filled with chilling cold. "You thought this village was a shelter, but it is a snare." He bolted from the truck, running up the hill, heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped animal. Rain began to fall again, and despite the familiar path, he couldn't remember how he had climbed it before. The orchard around him groaned and creaked, the rotten apples falling at his feet like bruised skulls. His steps faltered as the house came into view. The windows flickered with candlelight, the curtains swaying though the night was motionless. The door opened slowly, as if inviting him inside. Margaret was waiting. "Come," she beckoned, voice softer now, like a lullaby. "You've been wandering long enough." Matthew's body moved against his will. He crossed the threshold into the cold depths of the house. Inside was a cavernous dining room, where the table was laid with plates piled high with decaying food and goblets stained with old wine. A fire burned low in the hearth, its flickering flames casting grotesque shadows that danced along the peeling walls. "This place," he hissed, "what is it?" Margaret sat down in an armchair beside the fire, eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "A place for lost souls like you to rest forever." The air grew thick and sickly sweet, like rotting fruit, suffocating as if the house itself was alive and breathing. Then Matthew noticed the grim details. The photographs on the wall, yellowed with age but unmistakably distorted faces of past visitors all trapped in time. Eyes hollow, mouths frozen in silent screams. He tried to run, to break the spell, but the floorboards groaned and shifted. Each door slammed shut, trapping him like a bird in a cage. The walls whispered in voices too faint to understand but filled with despair. A sudden cold touch on his neck made him whirl around. The little girl stood behind him, doll held out as an offering. "You cannot leave," she said, voice a haunting echo. "No one leaves Rivenwood." Matthew's knees buckled under the weight of terror and the suffocating magic of this place. He sank to the floor, heart pounding, mind slipping towards madness. Margaret's voice dripped like poison. "The toll, Matthew. Your soul. Only that will set you free." "No," he gasped, stomach twisting. "I will not." But as the night deepened, the house's insatiable hunger wrapped around him tighter. Every window showed the same image, him, trapped behind the wheel, returning again and again to her house like a moth to a flame. He screamed into the void, "Help me!" And the only answer was the cold, wet steps of Margaret descending from the shadows once more, her eyes gleaming with triumph. For more stories, like and subscribe.